I thought this was a very interesting article that I wanted to share with you guys. An analyst and power of the social dynamics in Mean Girls. The movie has such enduring power and is quoted so much because it sheds light on real sociological phenomena. It's compelling because it's believable. It feels real. It might seem like a show but teenage girls, but it's a nail-biting, exciting as late-night poker because it demonstrates decision-making with stakes. Our story begins with Katie. Katie's been homeschooled her whole life, which makes her a perfect blank slate character to explore social reality with. What is normal to us and strange and foreign to her. Kind of reminds me of being autistic. Like, I feel like relationships and getting along with people is easy for some people. Just put it that way. A lot easier than others. Now, she has no preconceived notion of how people behave or ought to behave in cliques and groups. She's fresh, almost alien. We relate to her immediately. We all know what it's like to be thrust into an environment where we don't know the rules. The first thing that happens when she shows up to school is overwhelming chaos. She's unable to make sense of the elaborate cascading complexity that are high school social relations. She is unaware of unspoken rules and takes appearances to be reality. Seeing as believing is a natural human tendency, and we all know what it's like to play by one set of rules before discovering that there's a second, unspoken set of rules that actually govern the game. Like all newcomers, Katie gets pushed around. This is standard operating protocol. It happens to be the new girl in prison and Orange is the New Black. It happens to each new employee that shows up at the office. Gosh, I feel like it was my entire life being a military brat because I was constantly moving. I went to like 10 different high schools or 10 different schools growing up. Not high schools. I only went to one high school, but I went to like 10 different schools and a lot of different elementary schools, and I had to constantly go through. I totally relate to Katie. So what's actually happening is jostling for position. Groups need to sniff out new individuals to see where they ought to stand in the hierarchy. A social group typically has clearly defined alpha and omega and everything in between as largely eligible. The alpha group and the Mean Girls are the plastics, while the omega and Janice and Damon are suspected to be, I don't even want to say that because I don't. So the alpha and the Mean Girls are the plastics, while the omega are Janice and Damien. Both are relatively unattractive, relatively unremarkable, and insignificant in the grand scheme of things. The omegas, Janice and Damien, are the likeliest group to take Katie in from the start. They have nothing to fear from her presence because they have nothing to lose. The movie could actually have ended here. Katie becomes friends with Janice and Damien, and they live happily ever after, hanging out together, mocking the hollowed plastics from a distance. The story only progresses into conflict and complexity because Katie is attractive. If Katie were unattractive, she would happily join the math club, stay friends with Janice and Damien, and everything would go happily ever after. It would be a sitcom and probably quite an amusing one. But Katie's attractiveness makes her a potential threat to the plastics. Is absolutely central to the plot. Attractiveness is the social currency in the Darwinian environment of North Shore High. It isn't a coincidence that plastics invited Katie to sit at the table with them. They effectively talent scouted her. Regina knows Katie for the potential threat that she was. If the plastics assumed to her the group, keep your enemies close, they can control her. I remember once when Barbecue told me that. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. If she were a free agent, she would earn the attention of the attractive boys, Aaron for instance, and she would threaten the alpha status of Regina and the plastics. She would delegitimize them. Now, the alpha groups still have in-group politics. Katie alludes to this when she's describing how she found herself desiring Regina's approval despite hating her. This is a very common trope. I'm reminded of this toxic relationship between Kathy and Heathcliff in Wuthering Heights. And while abusive relationships everywhere, people get drawn to power, even if it burns them. Gretchen, too, chooses to be miserable within the plastics rather than leave it because the plastics are collective within the alpha group. Better to be the bottom feeder in the best group than to be outside of it. Now, the plastics maintain their alpha status through attention, through being desired by everybody else and looking good. They're effectively the tip of the spear, desired and envy and loathed by everyone. It's interesting to study the social dynamics within the plastics themselves. Now, Regina is rightfully Queen Bee. She's attractive And more importantly, she's the most socially intelligent. That's what gives her the power to manipulate others so well. She understands people's fears and insecurities. She's also rich, and she drives all of which are assets that she can leverage. Walk home, bitches, she goes. So the money is a big thing. When you got money and you can toss it around, you can control other people because other people want your money. So she says, walk home, bitches, when she goes, when her clueless followers side with Katie instead of her and attempt to use her arbitrary rules against her, the rules that she's invented to control them and keep them in line. She demonstrates her sociopathic intelligence several times, which is clear she derives pleasure from this. The moment that spoke to me was when she phoned Katie with, I know your secret, and then went on to say, you don't hate Gretchen for ratting on you while Gretchen was on the phone. She deliberately plays people off against each other, manipulating them and their insecurities. She lies to Aaron about Katie. I'd go as far as to say that she built the burn book all along as blackmail capital. It's a dead man switch that she can use as leverage against anybody who contemplates backstabbing her. Socially manipulative people like Regina they store bullets. It's like Batman keeping kryptonite in case he has to ever kill Superman. They know a lot about everybody and they have superior information. People like Gretchen, they're clueless. They seek Regina's approval and freely divulge information to earn that superficial approval. Notice how insidious Regina is. She got Katie to insult Miss Sharon in the burn book. All of this is leverage that Regina puts together to shore up in her own social capital. It took a deus ex machina to defeat Regina. The conflict is resolved by a random act of God. The antagonist gets hit by a bus and decides not to antagonize anymore. This is the near-death trope. When a player experiences significant trauma and decides they don't want to play anymore, this is a bit of cop-out and probably an artistic choice for the sake of limitation of the movie. Think about this. What would happen if Regina didn't get hit by the bus? Even if Katie decided to quit the plastic scene, Katie's continued existence would threaten Regina's dominance as long as Regina cares about her social status. So Regina would have no choice but to decimate Katie altogether. It took a bus to take her out and make her decide that she didn't want to play. There's no defeating people like Regina in simple face-to-face confrontation. She has too many assets. Her looks, the attention she gets from boys, and above all, the shrewd understanding of interpersonal relations, people's insecurities, fears, wants, needs, and all the blackmail content she has. I suppose maybe Katie could have gone to the exile route and kept herself and the math kids, but that would have been less satisfactory movie, of course. Janice, who plays it straight, underestimated Katie. While she had nothing to lose by Katie joining her and Damien, she lost Katie to the plastics. I think this happens a lot with genuine people, clueless, who play their cards straight. We assume that their honesty and straightforwardness will be appreciated. Unfortunately, social reality can be like poker. There are real stakes involved and you don't win by playing nice. Different people have different interpretations of how the game ought to be played. Janice and Regina have completely opposite interpretations. Janice believes in being a straight talker, and Regina believes in manipulation for pleasure and profit. Katie's interpretation of how to play the social game changes throughout the movie. And that's her personal development as a character, and that's what makes the movie so compelling. She experiences multiple different social realities depending on how she wants to play her hand. Now, Gretchen and Karen aren't mean, they're just clueless. As I revisit the quotes of the movie, I realize that both of Regina's followers are clueless. They're eager for recognition, but they have no real idea how the social dynamics actually work. Gretchen isn't being a show-off when she says, I can't help it if people like me because I'm popular. She's genuinely ignorant of how she comes across when she says that. That's posture talk, not power talk. She gets punished for it. Her illusions are shattered. The ignorance of social dynamics explains why they immediately started following Katie around once Regina was out of the picture. Neither of them know how to actually think for themselves. They're programmed to follow a leader. Now, Katie was always too inquisitive, analytical, and questioning to be an obedient follower. Consider how Katie wanted revenge when Regina kissed Aaron. Gretchen and Karen wouldn't dream of doing that. They would have conceded defeat and yielded to Regina and perhaps convinced themselves that it was for the best. You might think you're attracted to him, but you're not. So kissing Aaron was a way of Regina's way of establishing dominance over Katie. She gains pleasure from manipulating others, and that's how she maintains her top dog status. She's used to having followers and didn't quite expect Katie to retaliate. I'm going to leave it at there. Stay salty, my friends.